Native American friend today.
Ugh, that sounded awfully prejudiced to me.
You know damn good and well I'm not prejudiced. I hate all people equally.
That you do. Are you going to call the newspaper today?
Yep, today's the day. That suicide yesterday was the last straw. I reported Lemons, that little shit officer, over a month ago for making remarks to that inmate. His words just keep echoing in my head. I heard him say, "Why don't you do us all a favor and just kill yourself?" Or, "Hey, if you're all out of razors, I can get you one." He didn't lose one shift after I reported him. He was working yesterday when Kip killed himself. Well, I'm pretty sure there's no way to pin it on Lemons. I bet my life that razor was dropped off by him. Johnson was working with Lemons when it happened, and he went home right after he found out. He witnessed it the day I chewed Lemons' ass for making shitty remarks. Here's hoping Johnson has balls enough to tell the truth when they investigate it, but they'll probably just cover it up to prevent a lawsuit.
Lemons is a piece of work, all right. Speaking of calling the newspaper, have you done sufficient practice eating crow? I remember your last taste of crow. Wasn't it when you answered the phone with, "Damn it, I told you not to call me again," and it was the priest from a local church and not who you thought it was?
Ha, ha, ha. I had gotten 4 phone calls in a row from that officer that day. How was I supposed to know the priest would call me right that second? I think the priest has forgotten about that, but not you. It would be good if you could forget my screw-ups and remember my accomplishments for once.
I never forget your good deeds. They are many. Yet, I believe that the sheer depth of your screw-ups and how you seem to get out of them unscathed is what makes it so worthwhile to have you as a friend. We natives call that coyote medicine. Are you nervous about calling the reporter?
Not really. I'm sure he's been told to screw himself by more important people than me.
Yeah, but not as proficiently as you did it. Proficient for you is synonymous with EXPLOSION. Boom!
All this flattery is not improving our friendship. He's a good reporter. If he can take responsibility for the snafu that caused me to tell him what a jackass he was in the first place, we should be good to go.
Optimism. Your strongest trait. Right behind that homicidal look you get before expressing your feelings.
How do we remain friends?
I put up with you.
Uncle, you win.
Do you think you can understand the difference between a reason and an excuse?
I think so. Look, I've got a call before I chicken out. Thanks for your support.
Yep, anytime.
This is Cooper.
Hey, Karen Pence. I don't know if you remember me or not, but you called me about 2 years ago to request an interview about the mental health programs at the prison.
Oh yeah, I think I remember you telling me to kiss off with a bit of flair.
That would be me. It was nothing personal, but if you'll remember, at the time, you were doing a little ass-kissing with the county attorney, who had the motto of, "Let's put him behind bars and throw away the key." The tough on drugs and other crime mantra that has filled our prisons, but sure as hell not made our society safer or better.
That would be me before I got an education about how crooked she and the prison can be. Of course, the county attorney played, and I played right into the county attorney.
It's nothing personal, but you deserve that. The scars from those burns will help you remember that you need to get the facts straight before you print stuff that isn't true. But you learned your lesson well, and aside from a few errors here and there, you're a damn good reporter.
Thanks, Pence. And there's a story out of the program. I learned that a lot of the inmates and officers really respect you. You're a damn good counselor. Was?
Yeah, I quit yesterday after one of the inmates committed suicide. The bullshit story about how mentally ill he was and how they worked with him on a daily basis, but to no avail, should be spoon-fed to the paper anytime. I'm pissed, and I'm declaring war. I have a story. Actually, a lot of stories. But we need them done without word leaking out until we're ready. And then we want the media inundated with them for as long as possible, with one right after the other. I've been working on this for over a year now, and I need to be able to trust you.
So what have you got in mind?
Can you come to my office right now? It's right around the corner from the paper.
Sure. Are you still in the Taylor building in that vacant office? Give me 5 or 10 and I'll be there.
That's the office. See you soon. Morning.
Good morning.
Plans have changed a bit. Cooper will be here in a few.
That's a good thing.
Yes.
He's a good reporter. He's arrogant, far less than I've seen many reporters. He's also written some great human interest stories.
Yes, he has. I have a lot of respect for a lot of his writing, and that's why I thought he'd do a great job for us.
I believe he will.
Hello.
Hello, have a seat. This is Mr. Griss. He's an attorney that's been working with me on some things. We all agree you'd be a great fit for this adventure.
Are you sure you're not suing me?
For right now, I'm not. But that could change at any time. Really. Thanks for coming. Now back to the trust thing. We've got to be able to trust you with some rough information. It could be tempting to jump the gun and publish some of this stuff now.
You can trust me. Is it just about our prison?
Prisons and jails across America, including ours. Attorneys, judges, officers, crooked people, which in general includes the media.
Well, this will get ugly.
It will. And here's a tricky part. We don't want to go after the people. We want to go after the behaviors, rules, and policies. If possible, we want to change the system without slaying those running them. Many of them are not bad people, but as Penn says, some are sick as hell. Those people need to go.
Sounds like a counseling fairy tale? The good witch, bad witch plot? Which one are you, Pence?
A sense of humor. I'm hoping to play the good witch, though it probably is a fairy tale. This is the first time that I've had all the people in line to blow the whistle, however. I think if it's done right, we could start a movement that could change a lot of things. Right now, America needs some positive changes, not a bunch of jackasses getting their kicks out of wielding power, getting rich, and having sex with perfectly proportioned hotties.
When you say the crooked media, are you calling me crooked?
No, people like you often print the easy fluff to beef up a dramatic story, rather than dig for the truth, while other reporters will just make something up. That's not corrupt, that's just bad journalism. Everybody makes mistakes. I've even made one or two. Learning from our mistakes is crucial. In fact, if you're in, the leading article will be your confession about how you, the media, often make mistakes. We'll use the current suicide and the story you did about that officer getting killed up there as examples of poor reporting. You were so wrong with that story. You were fed shitty information. On the flip side, you did nothing to investigate the real story. The truth got buried, and the inmates were blamed, which is often the case.
Ouch. That was one of my best articles.
Well, if the information had been true, it would have been a great story. But it was so far from the truth, it sucked. And again, the officer was made out to be a saint. How many obituaries honestly describe the deceased? It's always, "Dear old John Doe went home to be with the Lord last night, surrounded by his loving family." Hell, most of those people wouldn't speak to one another. They hadn't talked in over a year, and all they did was spend their time bitching about each other and how they'd never speak to each other again. Until someone's on their deathbed, and then poof, they all race home. Tears and kind words abound, while in their heads they can't wait to get the hell out of there. And then the obit continues. "He's survived by his loving wife, 3 beautiful children, and a darling dozen or so grandkids."
Wow. As a mental health therapist, you can always put such a positive spin on life's issues.
Well, that's because I'm the person they come to see after dear old John Doe is on his way to wherever he's really going. Then I hear the true obit from the other daughter. The insults and slights, the beatings, the sexual abuse, getting slapped around for crying, being told you'd never amount to anything because you're a piece of shit just like your mother. All the things that lead children to learn self-hatred. Then I learned that sisters Susie and Jackie were in the den smoking weed the entire time dear old dad was dying. Their brother Tommy sucked down a fifth of scotch and got a DUI. Dear Martha Jean has daddy issues now that he's gone. But none of that goes in the obit, does it? And we wonder why people turn to alcohol or other drugs. Either that or they're over-the-top religious to where everything's a sin and the only way to survive is to spend all your time in prayer or pointing out the sinners. No room for being human.
Do you ever hold back?
Of course. If I go to a funeral, I don't ask how long it's been since the family spoke to each other that's now all huddled together in solidarity. I don't ask if there were any drug convictions, DUIs, incest, pending divorces that preceded the death. I show heartfelt empathy and hope like hell nobody asks what I do for a living. Believe it or not, I can be a pretty nice person and a lot of fun, but not when I'm hurt or pissed or see other people hurt. I believe I can make a difference.
Before we get started, we want you to know that we have both worked with amazing officers and correctional employees, but they are the minority. Most of the prisons are stuck as far away from society as possible, so it's hard to find and keep good employees. None of this is about personal revenge. We are out to start a movement that can treat people before they go to prison.
We're out to start doing real rehabilitation, or habilitation if we want to be accurate. Rehabilitation means putting someone in a place they used to be. We need habilitation, which is putting someone in a healthy place. This is the place that most of these people have never been. I get caught up on words and their meanings. I would like someone to seriously look at the prevailing insanity of dehumanizing people. The more we imprison, the richer some people get. Human lives were not meant to be a commodity like cattle or freaking yogurt pops. Isn't there a word for that besides bullshit? Oh yeah, successful entrepreneurs. That's it. One of these days over coffee, I'll explain cognitive dissonance. It's the meat and potatoes of most human discussions.
First of all, can you commit not to running with the first few stories? Can you do it on our timeline?
Yeah, I can. Wait, who is our?
Our county attorney, Gris, a famous criminal defense attorney, a couple of counselor friends, some prison officers, an ex-warden, and you'll meet the parents of the kid that just killed himself.
Our county attorney is in Martin? Are you kidding me? She's one of the most cold-hearted women I've ever met.
She was just that until she tried to get me fired after the officer got killed up there. Her hoity-toity attitude backfired, and some of the inmates slaughtered her reality. Something melted inside of her. It was actually kind of beautiful. In a therapist sort of way. I'll tell you about that later.
You love to see people fall, don't you?
Absolutely not. I love to see people learn. Martin learned the difference between arrogance and humility. She's actually quite remarkable.
Okay, I gotta hear this. How much time is this project going to take? I can't just quit doing what I'm doing without telling my editor.
Then forget it. I'm not kidding, Cooper. If one soul finds out about this, it's over. No one is to know about this until all of the stories are told, verified, and ready to print. Not until Matthew Pierce marches into the courthouse and files 2 huge class action suits, which of course you will cover.
So I do all this on my own time?
Yep. And when your editor reads these stories, he'll pay you 5 times the money. And then you can pay me for putting up with you and giving your career the biggest boost you'll ever get.
Give me something. Make me want to tell the stories.
All right, but if you screw me on any of this, I may consider hiring a hitman.
Oh, I believe you would. I'll be a good boy.
Couldn't wait?
Oh, I always like to lay eyes on people you refer to as a-holes. It's fun to see if you're right or if you'll have to eat crow again.
You called me that? Is that counselor-like behavior?
I can have anger issues when I see unhealthy behavior, and I have been known to lose my professionalism and call someone a name. I am, of course, usually right, but I believe I may have been wrong in your case. I humbly apologize.
You don't look that humble.
By all means, Miss Pence, I'll accept your apology, and I shall also document it, as I'm sure it is a rare occurrence.
Well, I guess you know.
Pence has a lot of faith in you and your writing. It'd be best to listen to what Pence has to say, document it, and formulate good questions until you collaborate with the witnesses.
You say you're one of her friends. Does she have more than one?
You'll fit in just fine. He's trustworthy.
Oh, really? And how can you tell that?
His eyes.
They look brown to me, and that usually signifies something else.
True. I guess time will tell.
We'll start with your article about the female officer that was killed. You know damn good and well I do not condone violence, and I'm all for people taking accountability and having consequences for their actions. But many inmates are not the violent monsters we make them out to be.
Don't tell me you're going to blame a 32-year-old female for getting killed.
Her behavior is the reason it happened. Her behavior is the reason it happened. You cannot cage people, treat them like animals, and expect them not to bite. Damn it, Cooper. I hate stupid questions. You need to listen to what I have to say, and think about it. You don't do that to your other interviewees when you're making a story, do you? I've never heard you say, "Excuse me, Warden, but did you just tell a lie?" No, you just listen to what he says and write everything he says down.
Like I said, you should really listen to what Pence has to say and formulate good questions after you write it down. I work for DFS, and you've written your fair share about us, but we've just never met.
I'm sorry. A kid is dead. An officer was killed. I'm angry, and I'm having a hard time explaining things without letting my passion for healing turn to poison.
We have written accounts from 6 officers and 23 inmates who illustrate quite well how Jenkins treated the inmates and the circumstances the night she was killed.
You can word it any way you'd like, but the fact of the matter is, she pushed the inmate over the edge. He has to be held accountable, but we can't pretend it was just another violent inmate.
All right, but you can't use someone's bad attitude as an excuse to get killed.
I'm not, damn it. It's not an excuse. It's a reason. Cause and effect. It's based on the truth, not all the fluff that hides shit. Here's a copy of your article. Let's go through it. Go to the first highlighted part. You wrote, "Officer Amanda Jenkins was a dedicated officer at Corrections, Inc. for the past 15 years. In quotes. She gave her heart and soul to the inmates to help them make positive changes so they could become healthy members of society when they left the prison. She dedicated her life to these inmates, and I cannot believe how they repaid her," Warden Adams stated in a heartfelt interview. End quote.
First of all, Cooper, the warden would have to have a heart for it to be heartfelt. He was just pouring out the bullshit to cover up what a lousy officer Jenkins was.
Jenkins was asked to resign twice and did during the 15 years because of her verbal and physical attacks on inmates. But as soon as the warden who had her move on, as soon as the warden who had her quit move on, she was hired back. She worked there a total of 6 years, but it was over the course of 15.
Pence has 5 sworn affidavits from fellow officers who all say that she was not only an unreliable officer, but a dangerous one. Barnes, the inmate who attacked her the night she was killed, had been harassed by her so badly that a lot of us actually talked about starting a pool to see when he'd get the shit kicked out of her. Here's one, and I quote, "Jenkins was one of the cruelest officers I had ever worked with." Hold on. Barnes was one of the cruelest officers I had ever worked with. Barnes had been harassed by her so badly the night that she was killed that a lot of the officers actually talked about starting a pool to see when she'd get the shit kicked out of her. And I know of a couple officers who said that they wouldn't be surprised if someone killed her, but I really don't think any of them thought it would go that far. And I don't think Barnes meant to kill her, but it's too late to argue that now. I know that he said he'd filed a couple of grievances on her and another jerk officer, but usually nothing comes out of the grievances except maybe retaliation against the inmates.
Another officer said, and I quote, "The night of the attack, inmate Barnes had just gotten out of segregation. I witnessed Barnes ask Officer Jenkins for some toilet paper. He'd been sick for 2 days, had the shits bad. Jenkins yelled at Barnes, 'You stupid fucker, I told you to go to your cell and leave me alone. Go whine to somebody else.' Barnes said, 'Don't yell at me, I need toilet paper. I've been sicker than hell.' Jenkins was still screaming and told Barnes, 'People in hell want ice water. You got your allotment. You running out is not my problem.' He was pissed and said, 'God damn it, Jenkins, I'm sick. It don't come out of your paycheck.' Officer Jenkins whirled around and said, 'Go to your fucking cell now. That is a direct order. I'll put you back in the hole.' End quote. That's when Barnes lost it."
Wow, that's cruel.
Cruel? That's sick as hell. Needless to say, after he lost it, he didn't stop swinging until they pulled him off of her. And then he started crying when he looked at her lifeless body. A roll of toilet paper, and none of this would have happened. A stinking roll of toilet paper. When the officer was asked why someone else didn't get him a roll of paper, he said, and I quote again, "Nobody fucks around with Jenkins. She'll turn on an officer just as quickly as she'll turn on an inmate. She was crazy as hell, and she's in the warden's back pocket." The quote goes on to say, "We're trained to look away. They don't have enough officers to cover shifts as it is. Some pretty shitty things happen, and we pretend we don't see." End quote.
Get back to your little article where you describe her as a devout Christian who attended services on a regular basis and sang her heart out in the choir. The last time she had attended services was 2 years ago and was asked to leave because she was drunk and her singing was disruptive. Where do you get the shit that you print?
Give me a break. The warden, her family, her neighbors, a woman from the church.
Another death, another saint. I have 122 pages of horrific behavior described by other people that this officer committed. And here she is in your article, portrayed as an angel who liked to sing. Talk about sick. She made it a goal to screw with someone every day and to make sure, as she was so fond of saying, "I'm going to make sure they pay for their crimes if it's the last thing I do."
It's not the officer's job to make the inmates pay for their crime. Taking their freedom away is their punishment. Officer's job is to make sure that the inmates don't abuse each other, the institution, and that the public remains safe. 95% of the inmates will be back out on the streets again. Many of them will leave prison far worse off than they went in. But we just blame them. A tidy explanation.
Okay, I get it. Pence, I know that you're a great counselor and your objective is to make healthy changes. But chill out, I'm not the enemy. Now that I know all that, I understand the article was shit. Let's map this out and see how I'm going to help. I mean, you realize when we come out the other side of this, people are going to go berserk because we're essentially blaming a 32-year-old female for her own death at the hands of a violent criminal.
He had zero violent crimes until that night. 0 fights while incarcerated. This guy who killed her sold marijuana.
He was a high school dropout with no violent history. I had worked with him as a kid. And I don't know if this makes sense or not, but Pence's goal is not to make that officer out to be the bad guy. Her goal is to get us to start addressing the real issues and stop bullshitting ourselves about unacceptable behaviors, whether they're from an inmate or an employee. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's okay to sell drugs. I just think we need to learn to look at the whole picture and deal with each component and not just write people off because they're drug dealers.
This is where you come in. We need you to paint an accurate picture that gets the attention of the American people. We as a nation are better than this. And we know that you can write stories with compassion without having it look like a bleeding heart sob story about disgruntled prison employees or inmates. This is about humanity and the big mistakes we are making.
Wow, that's a tall order.
Yep, but we're sure you can do it, or we wouldn't have asked you. Moving on. I learned that Officer Jenkins had a cousin she was very close to. Her cousin was raped when they were 18. They were at a party together. Jenkins was passed out, and she blamed herself for the rape.
I don't think she could forgive herself, so she had this personal vendetta to settle with all inmates. Hell, Jenkins was traumatized by the rape, And like many wounded Americans, we see revenge as a solution to emotional pain. I get hurt, I hurt somebody else.
I work with these inmates every day. A lot of them have screwed up big time, and they need to have consequences. But they don't need to be treated like shit and made worse. They already hate themselves. Shaming them won't make them better citizens.
We are supposed to be correcting behaviors, not creating more hate. We cannot promote an us versus them mentality. Hate does not bend. This officer's story is just one of hundreds that shows how screwed up our prison systems are. That's why we have to take our time with these stories and not come out looking like a bunch of pissed off inmates advocates.
Well, you're spot on there. Tell me more about how Martin saw the light. I've never seen that woman be anything but vicious and vindictive.
Oh, I'll tell you this story, and Martin will roll her eyes when you ask about it and admit that everything I'm saying is true. Mark my words. Linda and I were eating at the grill when it came over the television. Martin, Judge Walker, and a bunch of their groupies were getting drunk at a table nearby. The reporter said there was a possible riot at the prison, and according to an unnamed source, a female officer had been killed and 2 male officers had been seriously injured by several inmates.
Martin made this dramatic toast that she would personally prosecute and hang the bastards responsible for that heroic female officer's murder. She railed on with this speech about how officers put their lives on the line every day, and for what? To be attacked by these violent criminals. She declared she would personally seek the death penalty. Martin was babbling on, and Pence just flipped.
I stormed over to her table and I jabbed her, verbally, about the 2 empty beer glasses in front of her and the full one that she was toasting with. I brought up the judge's drinking problem, and I chewed all their asses for drinking and driving. I popped off with something like, "Wouldn't this make your 3rd or 4th DUI, Judge?" And then I fumed out. Either that night or the next day, Martin and the judge started discussing my future. Martin called the warden and they hatched a plan to have her job shadow me for a couple weeks, basically to get enough to get me fired. She told me this after a couple weeks of following me around. The best part is, the warden doesn't know that the information she has will take him down, not me. He thinks she's still putting together information. I wish I could be there to shout, "Surprise, dickhead!"
I thought you wanted to make positive changes and not bring others down.
Shit, did I say that? Let's make one exception. Back to Martin. She attended groups with me and did rounds with me in segregation. It got kind of hairy a couple times in groups when the inmates would get pissed at her, but it all turned out amazingly well. She had another situation in her personal life that I think helped shape her changes.
Oh yeah? What made the Wicked Witch of the West melt?
Hey, Cooper, I'm glad you're doing this. Chris, Linda.
Perfect timing. He was just telling me how vicious and vindictive you are. He just finished calling you the Wicked Witch of the West. I so fear how this meeting may spiral downhill.
Oh, I'm sure you planted that seed right after playing the Good Witch, Cinderella, or some other saint like Goody Two-Shoes. Cooper, make note that her angel white halo is upheld with invisible horns, really sharp ones.
I thought you didn't want to be involved.
I don't really have a choice. You've ruined my career, so I'm just here to watch as 20 years of my life circle down the drain.
Honey, I didn't ruin your career. Arrogance and alcohol did that. Is that how they came up with AA?
Enough! I quit drinking. I'm here to help ruin my career.
Are you admitting you have a problem with alcohol?
Don't
That's
write
off
that
the record.
down.
Okay. But then again, it wouldn't make a beautiful headline. Drunk county attorney clashes with insane therapist? Kind of brings a tear to my eye.
He had just asked me what turned your stone-cold heart to flesh. Please try to listen and not interject unless absolutely necessary.
To comply with Miss Pence's request for brevity, I'll just simply shout out, check, if I agree with her mostly fabricated perceptions about me, or I'll give you one of those, oh my God, we'll talk later looks, if she blatantly lies. I think that there'll be more of the latter. Thank goodness I'm here to defend myself.
Okay, so the first group that Martin attended cracked her armor.
Check.
She came into my trauma group after the inmates had come off a 30-day lockdown following Officer Jenkins' death. She was posing as a caring attorney interested in mental health services. She was gathering dirt to get me fired. Since she didn't know them, I asked the guys to do a check-in stating their crime, how long they'd been in, why they were taking mental health groups, and how they were doing with the whole thing with inmate Barnes and Officer Jenkins' death. Several of the inmates in the group witnessed it.
I'm here for a murder I committed. I gotta serve another 20 years before I'm up for parole and it'll be denied. I come to group because I'm fucked up. I learned that my childhood screwed me up and PTSD is real. I seen counselors almost all my life, but never got much of an understanding until just recently. I gotta deal with this shit, so I don't kill nobody else. Jenkins was messing with a lot of inmates. Just so ignorant with them. A lot of us were taking bets on when somebody would kick our ass.
I'm here for aggravated assault. I got 5 years, and I have to serve it all. I truly don't know what happened the night I was arrested, but I know my wife doesn't lie. I was blacked out drunk. I never hit a woman before that night. My wife called the police and said I had attacked her. My wife says I beat her, then it happened. I'm in this group to address my depression, my alcohol use, and now I've been diagnosed with PTSD from my childhood abuse. Before I came to prison, I would never say I can understand why a man would hit a woman. I'd watch my mother beaten so many times by my father, and she never did anything to him. But after I watched the way Jenkins acted for the past 3 years, I totally understand why she got attacked. She is probably the meanest woman I've ever met. She is the twin of my father. I said that Barnes isn't a bad guy, but that night Jenkins screwed with him, pushed him over an edge. He'd been sick for a while, vomiting, diarrhea. I knew when I heard her screaming at him, it probably wouldn't end well. Not only did someone lose a life, but all of us are paying for it because we're seen as low-life criminals. We've been locked down ever since it happened. This has been rough.
I'm here for doing meth. I have to serve at least 5 years before I get to see the board. I came to this group, well, I came to this group because one of the inmates told me about it. I know I need to find another way to survive if I want to stay the hell out of prison. This group has helped me put things together. I might be able to stay clean. As far as that officer, while many inmates were taking bets on her getting roughed up, my cell and I thought it would just be a matter of time before she got killed. We weren't hoping for her to die, we just aren't really surprised that it happened. I told Pence and that Martin woman that being locked down for this long has made many of us pretty fucked up. Being locked down 24/7, it pretty much gets to you.
I was a small-time pot dealer, but I sold pot to a couple of kids who had important daddies. A cop and an attorney who wanted me off the street to protect their perfect little boys. I definitely sold to them a few times, but they were far worse than what even us would consider to be losers. They were mean and violent, but untouchable because of who their parents were. One got killed while driving drunk. Killed his friend, too. Got booze from his dad all the time. The other went on to be an abusive husband. As far as I know, still is. Last I heard, he had her in the hospital. She almost didn't make it. Said she fell down those cement stairs. But everyone knew differently. Everyone just ignores the limp and the slash on her face. Falling downstairs can be pretty dangerous, you know? I got 5 years for selling pot the day that I turned 18. And believe it or not, I was what they called a model inmate. Until I ended up with the flu while in solitary confinement for something I didn't even do. Now I'm being charged with aggravated first-degree murder.
After the inmates finished talking, Pence asked me if I wanted to say anything. With all the arrogance I could muster, I said, yeah, I'll speak all right. I'm the county attorney for Lincoln County. I prosecute those who break the law or think they're above it. I believe that incarceration and long sentences are often the best way to keep the public safe and to reduce crime. I know I'm known as a hard ass, and I'm proud of it. I believe what I do is important. Are you telling me that if officers don't speak to you inmates properly, that it's okay to beat or kill them?
I couldn't breathe. I couldn't believe she was coming off so high and mighty. All of the inmates were pissed. Larson was ready to explode. I was nervous.
Is that what you got out of our conversations, lady? Is that what you heard? You're more fucked up than the rest of us. I don't think her listening skills are good enough to participate in our group. If you'll think back, we were just asked how we feel about a death that happened in our home. This is mental health. We're trying to figure out how to make sense out of shit that don't make no sense. Oh. If that officer was still alive, we wouldn't be talking about her. We'd be working on our own stuff. If that officer wasn't such a bitch, she'd still be alive. If she'd have known what her foul-mouthed shit attitude did to us inmates that already feel like scum, I don't think she'd have done it day after day. But she didn't, did she?
I intervened with some of my counseling mumbo-jumbo about anger and healthy communications and got the inmates calmed down.
First, I'm sorry about my presentation, but let's get some things straight. A lot of us murderers that come to prison truly are sorry. Not just because we come to prison, but because we took a life. That officer was somebody's daughter, somebody's aunt or sister, but on the flip side, she was a shitty officer. Am I surprised she's dead? No. Am I happy about it? No. Am I happy she's not going to be working here anymore? Absolutely. A lot of the prison staff knows what's going on, even though they present something different. Do you think it's okay to talk to prisoners like that? To call us pieces of shit? Fucking losers? Losing our freedom is our punishment, lady. We should not have to put up with abuse and ignorance from your fucking officers.
I think I understand what you're saying.
That was the moment I suspect Martin's hardened heart cracked.
Check, check, check. All true. And I didn't say I thought I understood because I was the most scared I'd ever been, which I was. I said that because I saw a flash of their reality and a good look at my arrogance.
Check. Martin attended 8 groups in all. She was exposed to all of the material and research about how the brain doesn't develop normally, especially when it's bombarded with trauma, specifically in childhood. About how the effects of trauma eats away until oftentimes we snap, broken enough to fight or run, often after alcohol or other drugs are on board. Generation after generation of dysfunction that we pretend isn't there and go on to pretend that incarceration will fix it.
The things I learned made sense, and it's changed a lot of things for me, a lot.
After that group, Martin watched as grown men cried as they processed the memories of the sexual abuse, their parents, their mothers, their siblings, or themselves being beaten by their fathers, or whatever boyfriend might be around, or hell, many beaten and degraded badly by their mothers. Over half of child abuse in this country is caused by women. Did you know that?
I watched as hardened criminals outright weep as they learned how trauma helped put them where they're sitting today. Drug addicts, alcoholics, felons. They learned that the choices they made and that the things they've been blamed for are just the natural tsunami that follows trauma. Many of them are pissed now to learn all of this, now that it's too late to avert all of the disasters. And Pence, she taught me that their childhoods are not an excuse for their behavior, but many of their childhoods are a reason they are who they are.
We can fix a lot of this through counseling. We can't fix it through humiliating them. I don't feel bad for the grown men in my groups who cry, but my heart aches for the little boys they once were. Not allowed to cry or speak. Hell, not allowed to feel without getting the shit knocked out of them. These are wounded people. Some of them will never change. Many of them would if given the opportunity and the help that's needed. Most of prison counseling is just meant to cover the institution's ass when they have a suicide. It's not meant to provide services to change behavior. Most of it is shame-based.
Many of the counselors are sick as hell and provide nothing more but a warm body to meet with inmates once a month per policy.
Not fair.
Newsflash, life isn't always fair.
Oh dear. Well, Pence will teach you that oftentimes life isn't fair because of assholes like you and me. Those who only scratch the surface and don't want to admit the truth. Of course, that label is totally in the past tense for me. I've seen the lights. And you shall too, my son. Then you and me, we can attend AA meetings together. A-holes Anonymous, right, Pence?
Wouldn't that be AAA meetings for you? Alcoholic Assholes Anonymous?
Oh, ha, ha, ha. You're so cute.
Having to deal with you two is so not fair. Actually, the not fair saying should be acceptable for the weather, but it's not really acceptable for human behavior that harms others. That's just a cop-out that stops healthy communication.
So Martin, after this rebirth, you decided to join the cause?
I don't know if I would call it a rebirth, but Cooper, have no doubt that being around Pence is far more painful than giving birth.
Put a sock in it.
So do you have a plan for how this is going to play out?
Oh, she's a walking plan. She's a therapist. Let me demonstrate how her mind works. We notice tension. Okay, boys and girls, let's do a 4-4-6-2 breath. In through the nose for 4 seconds. Now hold that in that O2, hold that O2 in those lungs to the count of 4. Now exhale with gusto for 6 seconds. One more time.
We have a starter plan. Gris and that famous criminal defense attorney will lead the way. We have reservations for a meeting room for the 15th and 16th at the Holiday Inn. Martin, Gris, an ex-warden, a couple of counselor friends, that defense attorney, and 4 of the 6 officers will attend. We have a list of over 100 people who are willing to testify.
Each has their own stories or contributions. A number of judges, wardens, officers, and employees will be listed as defendants in class action suits. Before that meeting, Pence has a list of interviews that you need to do. Several are at the prison. The criminal defense attorney is willing to head up the suits for both inmates and prison employees who have been completely mistreated or completely screwed over. Nationwide, not just here. We are after change. We'll ask for money, a lot of money, but not to be paid out to plaintiffs. All of the plaintiffs have so far agreed to do this on principle, not for cash. The money would be used for training officers, inmate programs, and increased wages for good employees.
I really don't know what I'm doing. All I know is that I have these unethical scenes playing in my head all day, every day. And I can't continue in this profession if it stays the way that it is. Still in?
I'm in, as long as I get to see more of that humorous side of you that I've heard so much about. Your ball-busting side's pretty rough. Can you do that?
Oh dear. Well, about 3/4 of her college classes were in ball busting. Oh dear. I believe that's a gender-specific saying. Hey, what do you call that class that teaches you how to bust females? A very interesting question.
How in the hell do you two get anything done together?
Well, let's just say that if it weren't for my patience and incredible skills, a new county attorney would be trying me for homicide. Figuratively speaking.
I knew I saw that in your eyes. Cooper, I often fear for my life when I'm around her.
I can be a lot of fun and positive, and sometimes that other side just bubbles over. But I'll practice my coping skills to ensure healthy behavior while dealing with your fragile journalistic ego and Martin's foolishness. Deal?
Deal. So how many people will I interview before the meeting?
About 20.
Before we get started, give me some examples of the kind of issues we'll be dealing with.
Well, first, we'll take a look at the rate of incarceration, especially regarding minorities. It's no secret that we keep building more prisons instead of addressing real issues that will help prevent locking people away.
2, you'll speak with an officer who witnessed some abuse in a prison in Florida that led to another officer getting stabbed. The officer was portrayed in the news report as the victim of just another random attack by a violent inmate. The report went on and said how many dangers officers face when they're at the hands of inmates to keep our communities safe. Disclaimer, many great officers do face danger in prisons, and there are inmates who are sick and hurt officers just because they're officers. Those inmates are truly dangerous, and many should be locked away forever. They're just not the majority.
True. Many of the sexual abuse claims that are filed are often against the officers. Many times, officers are the perpetrators.
There's a private prison in Idaho that lost its contract because it was violating human rights, falsifying staffing records, and was known as Gladiator Officers School for horrific violence. Many of the private prisons cut corners, lie, and do many illegal things, but they don't have to serve time. Last year, private prisons raked in about $5 billion of taxpayers' money.
Oh, there's got to be a multitude of songs in this material.
What?
There's nothing more entertaining than an ex-drinker who thinks she can sing. She's delusional to the point that she thinks she's a songwriter. Very talented indeed.
I am very talented.
Perhaps if you stick around long enough, she'll write one about you.
Hey, I'm gonna have to find a new career, and it very well may be in the music industry.
All right, Lady Gaga. Let's get back to work for now.
Do carry on, Miss Pence.
You two are scary. I keep hoping to wake up and this will all be a dream.
Dream on, dude. That woman's proof you can't judge a book by its cover.
As if you're a good read.
Back to business. Knock, knock.
What?
Knock, knock.
What the hell? From mass incarceration to attempted murder to a knock-knock joke?
Oh God, please don't do banana 10 times and then say, orange. You glad I didn't say banana again?
I hate that joke. It's not even a joke, it's just stupid. Oops. Never say stupid in front of a counselor unless you want a lecture.
Lighten up, dude, or I won't be able to work with you. It's just that you told me I had to limit how serious I am. And now look at you. A little humor and you're just this serious mess.
Are all counselors as insane as you are?
Well, I believe a good majority are.
Actually, Cooper, if you was to see what Pence goes through on a regular basis with her clients and the powers that be, you would understand her insanity and her anger. The stuff is pretty rough.
A couple more examples and you can have some cookies and milk. Drugs are not always brought in with the visitors in prisons. Some of them are brought in by officers, and they run a very lucrative business of their own. Many of those officers who were caught are walked off the job, not prosecuted.
This is true. Many of the times, the officers are the perpetrators.
Check. Next, I saw an inmate being escorted to medical because a nurse got pissed. The inmate was enraged and had every right to be. He was leaving in a week and said if that TB test wasn't in policy, he wasn't going to get it. There was no policy, they couldn't force him, but the nurse wasn't going to back down. She ordered he be cuffed and taken to medical. I watched it all.
Do you want me to get the next one? So, my brother, he hit and killed a judge's mother in a vehicle crash. About a week before that, he was at a wedding and he'd smoked a joint, so he tested positive for THC. But he was sober at time of the accident. This has just been, it's been pretty tough for me. But the judge, he tried throwing the book at him instead of taking responsibility for allowing his mother to continue to drive after she lost her license 3 years prior. She'd had numerous wrecks, but the police, they wouldn't do anything about it anymore. They were too afraid of the judge, so they just let her wreck and hope for the best. When that old woman pulled out in front of my brother, it wasn't his fault, and there were plenty of witnesses. But when that judge wanted revenge, I got to be on the other side of the coin. We can talk more about this later, but you get the picture, right?
And last, and one of the more unfathomable ones, how about the mentally ill man who died of thirst while in custody? He died after 7 straight days of being locked in solitary confinement in a Milwaukee County jail with no water. How is that possible?
Yeah, that's enough for now. When do you want to meet again?
Oh, well, usually Pence, she likes to see her clients once a week, unless she thinks they're a very serious case. I believe you're a very serious case.
We'll meet each day after your interviews. Your first 2 interviews are in 2 days at the prison. You'll go in with Gris, who's representing the inmates. One has been in prison for 15 years, and the other is the guy who's being charged for that murder of that female officer you wrote about.
How are you pulling that off?
Ta-da! I'm just not here to look pretty and fetch coffee. I play a very important role in all of this.
Yeah, it really isn't what you know, it's who you know. And all kidding aside, I wouldn't trade Martin for all the money in the world with what we're doing. You're an amazing human being. Thanks.
Oh, I think I'm gonna cry. This is so cathartic. I need to process my feelings. How do we go about that, Miss Pence? How long have you known Pence?
6 months. She called me about her grievances and I was intrigued. I had been working here and there on changing the corrections system since I got licensed. Then after, I got a rare call from the DA and was asked to do this. The opportunity was too great to pass up. I'm all in, as well as 2 of my legal partners. We cannot keep incarcerating people the way we do. Many of these drug addicts and murderers that you see were once abused children. But no one wants to hear the mitigating evidence. Pence's goal isn't cuddle a criminal campaign like many try to portray counselors. She is after change on how children are raised, educated, and getting treatments for those who fall through the crack. She is definitely after inmates receiving good treatment. As we discussed, when the inmates come in, you can ask what you want, write down whatever you want, but not a word is to be published without our approval.
I got it. I can be trusted. Besides, who'd want to get on the bad side of Pence?
Great point. This is Justin Larson. He's the Mr. L from the group Pence told you about. He's serving life for murder.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Same.
You can tell him your story, and then you can answer questions.
Okay. My mom had a stamp collection. It was worth a lot, but I really had no use for the damn thing. She spent hours enjoying them stamps. You know, my dad never let her have anything outside of the house without him. She told us stories about him, told us the history of every one of them. We got to see a beautiful woman without fear when he wasn't there and she was rattling on about the stamps. When she died, she left the collection to me. One day at work, I got a call that there'd been an explosion at my house. He said they thought it was a total loss. He was right. It was funny. The only thing I cried about was my mom's stamp collection. I had other stuff that was valuable, but nothing I cared about that much. They said they thought it was a gas leak. A couple of days later, I got another call from a friend of mine. Old friend, ran a pawn shop, Rick. He used to come over and visit when my dad wasn't home. He said I needed to come and see him at the shop after 5 o'clock. It was a weird call because he closed the shop at 5, and I hadn't seen him for months. Anyway, I went over to the shop and waited for the last couple of customers to leave. And he said, "You got to promise me you're not going to do something stupid when I show you this." You know, I had no idea what he was talking about. Before he pushed play on the machine, he reached under the counter and pulled out my mom's stamp collection. He remembered some of the stories. And then he pulled out some of my old coins. He'd seen some of them. I just looked at him. Didn't this stuff all burn up in the fire? He says, "You're not going to believe this, man." He remembered I used to fight at the drop of a hat. He pushed play on the security system, and coming through the front door of the pawn shop were two of my best friends. Tim had my mom's stamp collection, and Tommy was carrying my coins. He said they bought them at some job in Utah and wondered if they might be worth something. The police were suspicious about the explosion, but I had no idea who'd want to destroy my house. I'd been doing pretty good for 20 years and keeping stuff under control. Both of my friends had been laid off for a while. They knew damn well that stuff was worth a lot of money. I punched a pole next to the register and said, "I'll kill those motherfuckers." Rick grabbed me by the arms and tried to calm me down. Well, I composed myself, thought about how I would take him out. I spent a couple of minutes and got my stuff together while I figured out how to take care of him. I told Rick I'd going to call the cops. I'd be back in a little while. I took my pistol to Tim's house. When he opened the door, I just smiled and emptied my pistol into his chest. Then I called the cops. I was going to go to Tommy's house, take him out, but he wasn't home. The family portrayed me as a cold-blooded killer who had always been a hothead, but they knew their little prick son had blown up my house. Tommy lied to the police. Said they'd found the stuff at a garage sale when they were in Utah on some quickie construction job. Just a cash deal that they couldn't remember the name or the address of. The whole thing got dropped and I got sentenced to life. After about a month or so, I was eat up with shame and guilt. Knowing I'd taken somebody's life, somebody I grew up with. And there would have been two if Tommy had been home. I'd been seeing counselors since I was a kid, but nobody could explain why I was so pissed off all the time. I'd been diagnosed with all kinds of stuff. Anger management issues. Said I was out of control. That I was just like my father. Like there was no help for me. One of the officers told me that Pence was running a group he thought could help me feel better, maybe straighten me out a little bit. This officer knew how I was raised, knew why I was there. So I went to group. When I found out what childhood trauma does to a brain, I was so pissed off. Pence helped me see that a lot of stuff can go wrong, and we can't undo what we've done. I don't try to justify the murder I committed. I don't mean to justify the death of that officer, but I know why they happened. There's a reason why people go batshit crazy. Any questions?
What's the worst part of this for you?
The worst part of it for me is the fact that I never had a chance to be okay. I might not have done this if I'd have got the help I needed when I was a kid.
Why did you agree to meet with me?
I want you to understand how angry I am that I didn't get the help I should have had when I was young. The only thing my school was interested in was getting me to quit because they were tired of putting up with my crap. The only thing my dad taught me was how to be violent. I want you to understand that a lot of us in prison are not just pieces of crap. We were screwed up when we were kids by all kinds of stupid stuff. We can't keep spending this much money building prisons when we could spend it on children and not have so much murder and addiction and hate. I want you to understand that the anger I feel now is about injustice, not about revenge.
Time's up. Let's go.
Hey, Barnes, this is the reporter, Cooper.
Hi.
Hey. We don't have a lot of time, so I'll cut to the chase. My attorney has copies of 8 grievances I filed against Jenkins and Lemons before the incident. 2 of the biggest assholes this prison has ever employed. After my 3rd grievance, I ended up in the hole for trying to get other inmates to file grievances against these 2 jackasses.
The hole?
Solitary confinement, or segregation as it's called in the public. I was found guilty because 2 of Jenkins' snitches testified I tried to get them to engage against officers. They shredded the other 7. I have a witness who will testify. An officer made copies for me because she knew there was shit going on with the grievances. She also knew I took a bum rap on that riot accusation. I spent 8 months in solitary for trying to address that bitch and her sidekick. I never threatened anyone. I never harmed anyone until the day I lost it.
If you have proof of all this, there are lawsuits in which cases have been won over solitary confinement abuses.
Basically, if they think you're a security risk, and they have some idiot with a heartbeat and a mental health license swing by your cell once a day, and ask something stupid like, do you plan on killing yourself? They've covered their ass. If the answer is no, then bingo, paperwork is in order. But if an inmate says yes, well, You wind up in a rubber suit in a padded cell. Have you ever seen the inside of a suicide cell? There's a hole in the floor that serves as your toilet. You ever shit in a hole in the floor? Have you ever eaten in the same room as your toilet?
Barnes is on our side. Lighten up.
Sorry. I had no intention on killing that woman. But I just spent 254 days in a cell by myself, out 1 hour a day in a 2-second visit for mental health. Pence was good to us, but the rest of those mental health idiots are zombies. They fill out their forms and go home and sleep at night. They don't give a shit about our minds. Did you know that the United Nations classifies over 15 days in isolation as torture? You're right, Cooper. There are laws against what they did to me and the other inmates. And I was well on my way to collecting enough evidence to fry those bastards, but I got let out. I was sick as a dog in the middle of begging for a fucking roll of toilet paper when that rotten bitch gives me a direct order to shut the fuck up and go back to my cell, or she'll throw me back in the hole. I snapped, okay? I snapped beyond anything I knew was possible. I remember the first 3 or 4 punches and then nothing. Until I was staring at her body. No movement. I knew. I just knew. Bet they left out the part where I sobbed for 4 fucking straight days, though, didn't they? I didn't want her dead. I wanted her to serve some time in prison. I truly wanted her to pay for what she did to us, day in and day out. I'm sure as hell not asking for yours or anyone else's sympathy. I'm just sick and tired of everyone looking at us like we're a bunch of crazed animals who were pulled off the street so they could feel safe and sound. Many of us are human when we come in, but we sure as hell don't leave like that. Most inmates who spend more than 5 years in hell, they don't leave nicer people. I have a list of about 20 inmates who filed grievances against these 2 officers. 2 filed for a bunch of medical issues. Same story. They filed anywhere between 5 and 10 grievances the same time I did. And of course the prison said they were out of the duplicate forms that let us keep a copy. But I got an officer to make copies for us. One of the guys that filed against medical died of a heart attack last week. They said he was just trying to get a medical discharge so he could go home early. Said there was nothing wrong with him. Nothing wrong but a bum ticker. Guess they were wrong on that one. The grievance process is supposed to protect us. It's supposed to let us fight for our rights without retaliation. All of the grievances we filed were either found to be unsubstantiated or just shredded. Inmates that filed over 3 had their cells tossed 3 or 4 times a day for weeks. Others had their cells moved every 3 or 4 days. The rest of us got thrown in the hole. Do you have any idea how badly that fucks a guy's head up? No, you don't. You've never been in prison. Sorry. I guess I'm just a little bit bitter. The officer who made the copies for us worked with the prick who took care of the grievances. She's got enough dirt on the grievance system to get at least a few people fired. Then if the pussy who has the job caves and snitches on Captain Dickhead and the almighty warden, they may end up doing some time. God, I'd love to bunk with the captain for a few weeks. Wouldn't that be hilarious? I'd even let him have dinner with us. You'll get a copy of the grievances in the name of the lawyer today or the officer today from Gris. I'm not doing this in hopes that you can get me off for killing her. Just hoping you can do something to change this chicken shit system that the free world thinks is rehabilitating us. You know, if all those sleazy judges, attorneys, wardens, and politicians who get blowjobs throughout their day and steal billions from the public had to go to prison for their crimes, oh, you could bet things would change. But they're pretty much safe. They make and uphold the law and live by a set of their own. I'm done. Any questions?
Are there any good employees with the state?
There's some amazing staff here. I've met some decent judges and a few cops. A few great officers. Few and far between in the prisons, but some really do seem to care. Some really do treat us fairly. Again, not a majority by any stretch, but it's nice when it happens.
Okay, time's up.
Thanks, Chris. Cooper?
Hey, I'm sorry to spring this on you, but this is the only time this week Manja could meet. After her, you can take a nap.
A nap? I'm gonna look into a frontal lobotomy. I don't know how much more truth I can stand.
Hey, Cooper.
Hey, Manja, this is Cooper.
Hi, Manja. I appreciate you agreeing to meet with me.
I'm nervous about this. It'll probably seal my fate in working in corrections again. Even the wardens and the officers hate snitches, and that's what I'll be considered.
Well, the Pence has their way. People like you will be running the prisons before too long.
She's a dreamer.
So Pence said you have proof that a lot of the grievances that were filed by the inmates in the past year were shredded rather than addressed. She also said you have some things you want me to look at.
Yes, I have both. Fortunately for the inmates, the guy in charge of the grievances had the hots for me. He tried to impress me with all the power he had over the inmates. He constantly bragged about all the fun he had while screwing around with the grievances. He and the captain think the inmates lose all their rights the minute they enter prison. Hell, medical even thinks that. An inmate just died because medical was playing games rather than doing their job. It's been heartbreaking to watch.
How do they choose which grievances get tossed?
It depends on what the grievance is about. If it's about food or phone calls, they answer those with policy and procedures. If it's a complaint against the staff, the first one or two is, as they say, investigated and found unsubstantiated with an account of their investigation, which often discourages inmates from filing again. If an inmate continues to file grievances against the staff, the retaliation begins. The cells get tossed over and over, or they spend a few months in solitary. They stop writing grievances and they warn the other inmates against filing. Often the inmates are told that the duplicate carbon forms are on back order, so they don't get a copy to prove they ever turn it in, unless they can finagle an officer to make a copy for them, which seldom happens.
Cells being tossed?
The cells are tossed under the premises of keeping the inmates safe and not allowing them to have any contraband or weapons. Most of the time, the officer literally goes in, tosses the inmate stuff around while they search. They don't put things back when they're done, and it often ends with a catty grin from the officer, letting the inmate know how powerless he really is. If they continue to file grievances, their cells are tossed often, or they'll just up and move them to a new pod, and a move to a new hall can be devastating for an inmate. Anyway, back to the grievances. About a month before Jenkins got killed, I found out the inmates were not getting copies of the grievances they were filing. I told an inmate I'd make a copy for him the day he filed grievances against her. He told me there were other inmates who wanted to file against her, as well as 3 other officers. I knew I was sticking my neck out, but I offered to make copies of any of the grievances they filed. I have all the copies of the grievances he filed against Officer Jenkins. I actually have copies of all the grievances that were shown to me. I think about 20 inmates filed, and I have copies of over 60 grievances that were destroyed.
Why would you offer to do that? You could get in deep shit for that, couldn't you?
Well, to answer your first question, I did it because there are about 6 officers who are deplorable. Their behavior towards the inmates is abusive. I treat the inmates fair and don't let them get away with breaking the rules. They treat me good. You don't have to be cruel to hold them accountable. I especially wanted to see 2 of the officers fired. And I was in hopes by me getting copies of the grievances that I could get that done. And as for the second part, yeah, I could get fired, but I'd rather take a chance on that than to continue supporting the status quo. I believed I had enough information to get something going, so I took a chance and I talked with Pence about how to report it. She told me what she'd been working on for the past year, so I decided to join her efforts. I knew if I didn't do something, I'd have to live with being part of the problem. I couldn't do that anymore.
Well, can I ask you a question that has to be asked?
Sure.
Are you clean?
Yep, I've never had any type of sexual relationship or friendship with any of the inmates. The only thing I did was make copies of the grievances. It's in the policy that the inmates are provided carbon forms so they can keep copies. We weren't providing them with the proper forms, so I made copies. They'll be pissed I did it, but technically, I supported the policy. I'm clean.
Pretty commendable.
We'll see. Fighting against this justice in the prison system isn't easy. They're a world unto their own. The general public doesn't pay any attention, and the politicians are usually in bed with somebody. So change is difficult and often impossible. I'm nervous. I'm going to give my notice a couple weeks before you guys go public.
Are you glad you'll be out of there?
Not really. There are really some great officers. And I believe that prison could help the inmates be better people. I believe that when I took the job. I still believe it's possible. It's just not possible with the mentality that's in charge.
Are there other things that you want to talk to me about today?
Yeah, I don't have time to do that today, but there are 2 inmates that I worked with that I believe have stories worth telling. The one inmate is what society calls a career criminal. He first got in trouble when he was 13 years old. He was one of the kids in that Kids for Cash tragedy.
Kids for Cash?
There's a documentary about these 2 judges who pocketed $2.8 million from a private juvenile facility. They were in cahoots, and they incarcerated kids who got into trouble. But they weren't a danger to society. Long sentences, too, for stuff like skipping school. The one judge, incarcerated in the Kids for Cash, constantly whined about how mistreated he was and denies any real wrongdoing. He's serving 28 years in federal prison. The one inmate in here that was caught up in that is now incarcerated as an adult. Another kid ended up shooting himself. This 2008 or 9 fiasco is a good example of what's really wrong.
Man, so who's the other one?
The other inmate's on death row, and I'm telling you, Cooper, I don't feel sorry for this guy. But his cell got tossed, and I ended up reading part of his pre-sentence report. With the childhood he had, I can certainly see why he hated women. He wrote some notes in the margin about get article, childhood abuse, adult murder, implications for the death penalty. I looked that up. Reading that was a game changer. I suggest you read it and talk with inmate Spencer.
Okay, thanks, I'll do that.
I gotta go. I'm available anytime next week or the week after 4 in the afternoon. Pence has got my number. One more thing. I hear a lot of jokes about the inmates writing too many grievances because they don't have anything better to do. There is some truth to that, but many, and I mean many of the grievances could and should be substantiated. There's really a lot wrong inside that wire.
Okay, I'll call you. Thanks for today.
See ya. Wouldn't want to be ya.
You're gonna be feeding me when I'm unemployed.
Absolutely. This one today will be rough. It's the mother and stepfather of that kid that killed himself the day I left prison.
Shit, Pence.
Yeah, you'll be okay, Cooper. They're nice people and they're willing to talk. Jake, Maddie, this is Cooper, the writer I was telling you about.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Cooper. Miss Pence has told us a lot about you.
Well, I hope it's the good version of what she thinks of me.
She's told us everything, so we know how far you've come. This is still really difficult for us to talk about, but I'll tell you some things, and then Jake can fill in. And if you have any questions after we're done, then you can ask and we'll talk about them too. My son Kip and I were held hostage by his father for almost 12 years. He beat both of us, and we couldn't escape until Bart killed himself drinking and driving. I had 2 other pregnancies, but I lost both the babies, and they couldn't survive the beatings. I was glad, because I didn't want them to have to live the way Kip and I were living. This is so hard. You're probably asking why I didn't just leave him. Well, you can't leave a man who has control of all the money, who has run off my family, who threatened to kill both of us if we ever tried to leave. One day, I took Kip and we went to the store. I don't know how Bart knew, but he showed up at the store and he said sweetly, "Honey, how about I take Kip for an ice cream and we'll meet you at the car, and then we'll stop and get a pizza to take home for dinner." I looked up at that clerk, hoping the terror didn't show. But then I just wanted to slap her moonstruck look off her face. But she didn't know what was about to happen. I didn't know until I married him. I won't go into what happened the next 5 days. I'll just tell you that Kip was never the same. He was never the same. Something in his mind broke. He never was able to be not afraid until after Bart died. And even then he was afraid all the time. He was just such a mess. I had him to all kinds of counselors, and they all said the same thing. This boy is a very angry young man, and he doesn't have any desire to change, and he won't even listen to us. Well, the juvenile court felt the same way. They thought locking him up might straighten him out. He was only 15 when they took him to that place. He was gang raped by 6 boys the second night he was there. They laughed and hooted at him and said not to worry, that soon it would be his chance to welcome new boys. The damage they did was, the physical damage was nothing compared to what happened to his mind. He ended up in a psych ward. When he got out, he found alcohol, and he was always in trouble, and he ended up in the pen. He had several psychotic breaks, and the officers and medical staff, and even some of the counselors too, said that he was just playing him. He told him, they said that he would threaten suicide if he didn't get help. They said again that he was just playing him, and if he always said that if he didn't get his way. Well, he didn't get his way. He didn't get the help he needed. He ended up he told him that he would, if he didn't get help, he'd kill himself. They didn't help. He did. I guess you know how it happened.
Yes.
Jake, did I leave anything out?
Well, I came along about a year after Bart died. Kip was 13. Now, the boy was a handful, but for some reason he liked me well enough to accept me into the home. He often complained about hearing his dad's voice. We thought it was because of all of the abuse, but he was afraid that his dad would come back. We told him the voices would go away if only he could believe that his father was really gone. After Bart died, the kids at school were relentless. Kip's dad was African American and went to jail 5 or 6 times before the accident. And then he killed a white local when he crossed the center line, drunker than a skunk. Those deaths were front page news. The kids at school made fun of Kip because he was biracial and because of the fact that his dad was in and out of jail and had killed that poor old man. They told him he'd grow up to be just like his dad. That terrified Kip. He started skipping school, and things went downhill after that. We tried to get him help, but we weren't successful. Kip tried to get the prison to take him seriously. He tried hard. Hell, we all tried hard. Maddie's got copies of all the letters we wrote to wardens. We went to the top. We even hired a lawyer. But Kip couldn't take it anymore. Well, I guess that's about it.
I don't know what to say. I'm sorry, I know it sounds stupid.
We don't expect you to know what to say. Being speechless is a sign of a good mind. We've had so many people open their mouths and say how sorry they are, how they wish they could have helped us, helped in some way, how God took my son home, how he's in a better place now. I could go on and on with the stupid remarks people make when they are uncomfortable and don't know how to talk about difficult subjects.
Why did you agree to meet with me?
Pence told us that you were trying to help her find some justice in this nightmare.
What do you hope to get out of all of this?
We don't want one other mentally ill human being live such an agonizing life and then die just to become another prison statistic. If your work can help just one person, our son will not have died in vain.
We better go. If you have any more questions, we can meet again.
How in the hell do you do this shit? Listen to these abuse stories all day long. Why would you do it?
It appears you may need some serious counseling.
No shit. Of course I need counseling after what I've been through the past few weeks, of course.
Aw, come on, Cooper. You needed counseling long before you met me.
Seriously, Pence, how do you do this? Some of this shit is so insane, I have a hard time believing it, and I saw it with my own eyes. Why would you do it?
Most people cannot believe this stuff happens. It disturbs people, and most Americans can't have their sense of reality shattered with truth. It's easier to believe that these reports come from a bunch of liberal hug-a-thugs who are just making crap up simply to elicit sympathy. People have to get well enough to handle truth and get involved rather than just pretending things are okay. People are killing each other every day, adults and kids, every day. It's not about finding bad people to blame. We have serious social issues that we aren't addressing. Shit, we have mothers who are willing to kill their daughter's cheerleading competition. Parents beat up referees at their kids' Little League games. But never fear, we'll just build more prisons.
Well, we know that's not the answer, but again, why do you do this work?
I do it because I still have hope. I see people who are willing to change, stay clean and sober, lead fairly normal lives after they realize what they grew up in wasn't normal. I see people find a purpose for living other than making themselves or others miserable. A reason far deeper than simply seeing who has the best or most toys, beyond being sexy and cool. I witness people who are able to, many of them for the first time, develop a sense of self, a sense of being okay, feeling safe, content with a sunrise or a smile. I do it because it's what we should be doing for each other. Someone did it for me. They told me I'd have to give it away to keep it.
How do you give it away without losing your mind?
Well, it only takes one man or woman who's been physically or sexually abused to get that look on their face. That look of, holy shit, I get it, it's not my fault. I learned to be screwed up, and I can unlearn it. Then we teach them how to live with honesty, humility, and purpose. But most of all, we teach them how to laugh. Laugh hard. Because let's face it, when many of us see the ugly crap that we've been through, the only way to make it stop hurting is to laugh. Sustained anger doesn't work. When you have healthy anger and can laugh, you can find a reason to get up and fight one more day.
You're nuts.
True. Nuts is easy. It's those people who think they're normal you gotta watch out for. Chris, where do we go from here?
As soon as Cooper has her stories ready, we'll have Pierce, the big-time defense attorney, file the class action suits in the federal court. We'll have over 100 plaintiffs, and we'll ask for $50 million so we don't have to start in the state court. The judge will have to certify classes in both suits. There's no way out of that. We have got a case. We'll be on our way on looking at these issues in the eyes of the courts and the public. It'll take years for a lot of this to get settled, but you can bet with lawsuits like these pending, there'll be a lot of changes implemented quickly.
Well, my editor's going to have to know about this sometime.
Yes. I have an appointment with your editor in August on the auspice of me running a legal column for the paper. That's 1 week before everything should fall in place. I'll explain him everything when we meet, and I'm pretty sure he'll agree to work with us on our timeline.
Don't worry, we'll tell him that we threatened your life and he'll have no choice but to forgive you.
Your editor will just be happy to be the first to run these stories. They'll be picked up by Associated Press and he will shine like a diamond.
$50 million.
Yes, and that's per case. Remember, all of the money will be spent on reform. The plaintiffs aren't out to make money.
The taxpayers should see a high return on that money. And if things go the way we anticipate them to, we'll have safer streets, lower taxes for the correction monsters. I would imagine the only person who's going to make any money off of this is you, Cooper. It'll go straight to his head. He'll be famous and everything.
Don't do me like that. I may be cocky once in a while, but for the most part, I'm pretty humble, and fame is not my goal.
Did you tell him about the song I wrote?
No, I swear.
Please tell me she's not going to sing again.
This little ditty is for you, Cooper. And I swear, if you write one word that's in bad light about me, it'll become more than just a song. It'll be a reality. I was talking to a friend of mine, said a writer had her pride, wrote a bunch of dirty lies, libeled her in every way. And you better watch your step, or you're gonna get hurt yourself. Somebody's gonna call your boss, tell him lots of lies. Don't do me like that, don't do me like that. What if I sue you, baby? Don't do me like that. Don't do me like that. Don't do me like that. Someday you might need me, baby. Don't do me like that. Listen, honey, can't you see? Alcohol will bury me. If you write about one way,